So, can 90 days really change everything? I mean, your whole life? Well, we're about to dive into a story that says, yeah, it absolutely can. It's the story of a guy named Daniel and how a simple 3-month deadline completely remade his world.
So let's set the scene. When we first meet Daniel, he's just stuck. He's 29 years old and at what you'd call absolute rock bottom. I'm talking no job, no money, no family to call on. He's totally alone in this tiny room. And even worse, he's convinced that this is it. This is his life forever.
So this really gets you thinking, right? What happens when you've hit that point, when you're at the very bottom, and you find just a single random piece of paper? How can something so small be the one thing that pulls you out of that despair and gets you to take that first impossible step?
All right, so here's what happens. Daniel's out walking one night, probably not going anywhere in particular, and he sees this tiny, torn note stuck in a shop window. All it says is 90 days. That's it, 2 words. But for Daniel, in that moment, it wasn't just 2 words. It was like a little crack of light in a solid wall of hopelessness. And for the first time in who knows how long, a different thought pops into his head. What if?
And that what if leads to his very first move. It's small, but it's huge. He goes back to his room, grabs a piece of paper, and just writes the number 90 on it. Then he sticks it on his wall. You know, it seems like nothing, but it's everything. Because now every single morning, that number is the first thing he's going to see. It's his deadline, it's his fight, and the clock is officially ticking.
Okay, so making a promise to yourself is one thing, right? But actually doing something, that's a whole different animal. And let's be real, Daniel's first steps were not glamorous. He wasn't starting a company or running a marathon. For someone where he was at, just getting up, just walking outside, that was a monumental battle. Imagine the voice in his head screaming that it was all pointless, and he did it anyway.
And look at the timeline here. This is so important. It's slow. Day 1, he just walked outside. That's the win for the day. A whole week goes by before he even manages to stop and look at a notice board. You see? This isn't a movie montage. This slow, steady, almost painful progression. That's how real change happens. That's how you build momentum that actually lasts.
So, eventually, he finds his way to a community center, and that's where he meets a guy named Marcus. And what's amazing about Marcus is what he doesn't do. He doesn't ask for a resume. He doesn't ask Daniel for his whole life story. He just says, "We are building things today. Come and join." That's it. A simple invitation. An open door with zero judgment. It was literally the perfect thing for Daniel to hear right then.
And then we get this tiny moment that changes everything. After messing up a few times, Daniel finally does a small task correctly. And Marcus doesn't throw a party or give some big speech. He just looks at him and gives him a single, quiet nod. And that nod, that little bit of earned respect, it was more powerful than 1,000 compliments. It was real. It was the first piece of concrete proof in Daniel's mind that said, hey, you can do this.
That one nod, that's the spark. It's where these little wins start to pile up, one on top of the other. And something really important starts to happen. It stops being about the tasks Daniel is doing and starts being about the person he's becoming. How he sees himself and, how other people see him begins to totally shift.
And you could literally see the difference in less than a month. Think about that. He went from being this guy with his head down, trying to be invisible, to someone who stood a little taller, someone who could make eye contact, someone who walked with a sense of purpose. It was like his body was finally catching up with the change that was happening on the inside.
So he starts helping this woman, Sarah, with her little food stand, and he gets his first paycheck. Imagine him just holding it in his hand. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was proof, tangible, undeniable proof that he was not useless, that his time, his effort, it was worth something to someone.
Okay, so then the first real opportunity comes knocking. A woman named Ruth, who owns a small business, hears about Daniel from Marcus. So she watches him work for a bit, and then she just walks right up to him with this super direct, no-nonsense offer. "I need someone exactly like you. Not next week, today." Wow. Talk about a test for all this confidence he's been building, right?
So things are finally looking up, which, of course, is when the big challenge hits. This is the crisis moment. A huge competitor, a real corporate Goliath, sets up shop right in their neighborhood. And its goal is pretty simple, to completely crush small businesses like Ruth's. Everything they'd been building is suddenly on the verge of being wiped out.
And the threat is brutally simple. It all comes down to price. This new company's prices are so ridiculously low, there's just no way a small local business like Ruth's can even come close to matching them. They are getting completely and totally steamrolled.
And the impact is instant and devastating.
Get this. In just 10 days, Ruth loses more than half her customers. Gone. The numbers are just brutal, and they don't lie. At this rate, the business isn't going to survive the month. It's that serious.
But this is where the new Daniel shows up. He knows they can't win a price war. It's impossible. So what does he do? He decides to change the battleground. He's going to fight them with the one thing the big corporation could never have, a real story. And he decides he's going to tell that story himself by knocking on every single door in the neighborhood. And man, was this tough. Imagine it. The first door, I'm busy, slam. The second, I don't have time for this. Even worse. The third door, no one even answers. That old voice in his head must have been screaming, "See, you're failing again." But he keeps going. And then, on the fourth door, he gets it. A yes. Just one person says they'll come to the shop tomorrow. And that one little flicker of hope, it was enough.
And that single yes started a chain reaction. Slowly at first, but it was happening. He just kept showing up, day after day, telling the story. And the yeses started to outnumber the nos. People started recognizing him on the street. Customers came back, and they brought friends. They weren't just buying stuff anymore. They were supporting a story. They were supporting them. The entire neighborhood was making a quiet, collective choice.
You see, this whole fight, it wasn't just about saving a business. Not really. It was the final test, the final piece of Daniel's transformation. His entire journey comes down to this one powerful idea, the incredible power of just showing up, again and again and again. And Marcus, his quiet mentor, says it perfectly. He tells him, "You became someone that other people believe in." Think about that. It wasn't a skill he learned from a book. It was character that he forged in the fire. He became this reliable, trustworthy person, not because someone taught him how, but because he built it himself, one hard day at a time. And then comes the payoff, the ultimate reward. Ruth doesn't just give him a bonus or a pat on the back. She makes him her partner, an equal. And when Daniel says yes to her offer, it's so different from his first steps. This isn't a blind guess or a desperate leap. It's a confident step forward, built on a solid foundation of 90 days of proof.
When you really boil it all down, this whole story isn't about some grand plan or a lucky break. It's about the decision. That tiny, crucial choice you make over and over again. The decision to get up just one more time, to knock on one more door, to try again, especially when every part of you is screaming to just stop. It's the decision to keep going anyway. So in the end, this story isn't really just about Daniel, is it? It's kind of a mirror. It makes you look at yourself and ask a pretty tough question. If a man who started with absolutely nothing could build a whole new life in just 90 days, what will you build in yours?